So last time we looked at the general setup of the internal anatomy, and we looked at the respiratory system in insects, how oxygen is moved throughout the insect body, all of that sort of stuff. Now we're going to look at two more systems, the circulation system or the circulatory system and the nervous system. Oxygen powers muscles needed to move blood around the circulatory system. Remember that insects have an open circulatory system. The hemolymph is not confined to vessels like our circulatory system. Instead, it just sloshes around that hemocell. It bathes all of the organs in nutrients. This is another advantage of having that high surface to volume ratio. There's no need for that fully managed circulation. Minor muscle contractions can move the hemolymph all around the hemocell enough so that all the tissues get the nutrients that they need. Now, this sloshing hemolymph, this carries all manner of things like nutrients, like hormones, wastes, any immunofunctions necessary to keep the insect safe from disease. It doesn't carry oxygen in the same way that our blood carries oxygen, though. Instead, the oxygen is dissolved directly into the liquid in the tracheoles, and it moves into tubes and moves around in that manner. In our circulatory system, we have this variety of cells, right? They take care of most of the transport functions. So we have these white blood cells that take care of our immunity. We have red blood cells that attach to oxygen and carry that oxygen where it needs to go. Most of our blood is made up of the red blood cells and the liquid that they float around in. This is why our blood is red. Insects do not have red blood cells, at least most insects do not have red blood cells, so that when an insect lets its blood out, shall we say, it doesn't look red. So this is why when you're driving down the freeway and an insect smacks into your windshield, that insect splatter isn't that terrifying red splotch. How scary would that be? Instead, it leaves sort of green or yellow or clear goo all over your windscreen. It's still blood that's spattered all over your window, but it just doesn't look nearly as upsetting as if insects had red blood cells. Now, all this hemolymph, all this blood is moving through the hemocell constantly. Even though the insect is very small, it's still not possible for the blood to move enough just due to natural physical forces or through its own attractancy. Okay, so it can't move with gravity or through like ionic forces, anything like that, at least not enough. The insects do have to do some work to maintain the circulation, and they do this through a system of muscular pumps. These pumps move the hemolymph through compartments in the hemocell that are separated by membranes. Now, there is one tube. It's not a true vessel, although we call it one, but it's an open-ended tube that does a lot of this movement. This is called the dorsal vessel or the heart. So you can see it on these drawings here. So here's this dorsal vessel or this heart. So posteriorly, it's a heart, and then anteriorly, we call it the aorta. So we got this dorsal vessel, the aorta there, dorsal vessel there. This is what you can see in this movie going on right here. So this sort of pumping, that is the dorsal vessel or the heart of this caterpillar, pumping hemolymph through the body. So it's got this dorsal vessel, it's got this heart that moves the hemolymph all the way through the body. It's a very simple tube. It's closed at the posterior end, and it's dotted with openings along its length called ostia. Singular is ostium. So ostia dot the dorsal heart and allow for hemolymph to enter into this heart. Now, these ostia have one-way valves. So this will allow the hemolymph to enter the dorsal vessel, but it'll prevent it from backflowing back outwards. Hemolymph enters the dorsal vessel via an ostium when the muscles surrounding the ostial valves relax. So it opens up that ostium. The hemolymph rushes in, and then the dorsal vessel begins to contract from the posterior end forward. So it has these waves of muscle contractions, and it forces the hemolymph forwards towards the head. These waves of muscle contractions will force that hemolymph out the end of the aorta, and it'll bathe the brain and other organs in the head with nutrient-rich blood. The blood then trickles backwards in the body. Now, this movement throughout the body is kind of helped through by a ventral diaphragm. So the ventral diaphragm is found down here. So you get the blood that moves from this posterior end of the heart through the aorta, dumps here, and then it sort of moves backwards and gets pumped a little ways into all these little nooks and crannies. And then the dorsal or the ventral diaphragm here will start to contract, flowing or pushing the blood posteriorly so it can get back into that heart and recirculate. So this ventral diaphragm lies on the floor of the body cavity. It's associated with that ventral nerve cord, and it undergoes these waves of muscle contraction called peristalsis, just like those waves of smooth muscle contraction we use to move food along our digestive system. Peristalsis. It happens in this diaphragm. It directs the hemolymph backwards and laterally. So this is going to ensure that all those little nooks and crannies of the insect get filled with blood and all the tissues get the nutrients that they need.
The roles of the circulatory system are to transport essential metabolites from the fat body to the cells, carry waste to the excretory system, and provide immunity to harmful organisms. Insects have a simple, open circulatory system. The circulatory system consists of a dorsal vessel running the length of the body. The dorsal vessel is divided into a posterior heart that contains intake valves called ostia, and an anterior aorta. The open space of the body is called the hemocoel. The hemocoel is filled with insect blood called hemolymph. Since insect hemolymph does not transport oxygen, it does not contain hemoglobin, and therefore lacks the red color that is characteristic of blood from vertebrate animals. Hemolymph is pumped forward by the heart through the aorta into the head and flows back through the body in the open hemocoel. Hemolymph re-enters the posterior heart through the ostial valves, and the cycle repeats. The hemocoel is always full of hemolymph, and the heart ensures its mixing. Auxiliary pulsatile hearts at the base of the antennae, legs, and wings pump hemolymph into those appendages.
So this is what hemolymph looks like. This picture up here. This is some microscopy of insect blood. It's a clear fluid, slightly denser than water, and it's a bit of a sticky substance. Sometimes it has some coloration, usually due to dissolved substances that are floating in the cells. You'll see insect blood that is green, you'll see insect blood that is yellow, insect blood that is clear, and occasionally you'll see insect blood that is red. Remember, I said that most insect blood doesn't carry oxygen throughout the body the same way ours does. However, there are a couple of instances where red blood cell-like organs or red blood cell-like things are present in insects. Not exactly the same thing as our red blood cells, but it does do the same job. It gives the blood a red coloration due to these hemoglobin-like properties. So the larval stages of these chrononomids, these non-biting midges. So you can see the larvae in this bottom right here. These live in very, very low oxygen environments. So the oxygen is so low in the environment that it's just not enough to simply diffuse in through the trachea like other insects can have. So there has to be an extra amount of effort to get the oxygen from that trachea and those tracheoles to the organs that need it. So these insects have evolved a hemoglobin-like substance in their blood. That this hemoglobin-like substance can carry oxygen to tissues when it's needed. So it'll attach to the oxygen, it'll move it to the tissues, it'll release the oxygen, pick up the CO2, and move that back out. So this ends up giving these insects this red coloration, and it mimics our own blood. So there are a few insects out there that are red-blooded, but they're not nearly as common as these yellow-blooded or green-blooded or clear-blooded insects that we see out and about. All right, now the nervous system. This is a really complex system. It has the job that conveys information, it integrates information, it intakes input from inside and outside the insect body, and it tells the insect what to do. This is so complex that we just don't have time to go through every little instance of the insect nervous system. There are entire classes devoted just to looking at the insect brain, let alone looking at the entire nervous system. So we're just going to barely touch the surface of what this insect nervous system does, and just talk a little bit about the two major bits of the insect anatomy. So the brain, that dorsal brain, is the center of the nervous system. It integrates all of those different messages that is received from inside and outside the insect body. It works in concert with that ventral nerve cord. So the ventral nerve cord is a really huge bundle of nerves that are studded with big balls of nerves called ganglia. So here's this ventral nerve cord. These large bundles of nerves here are known as the ganglia. They act almost like little tiny brains studding the ventral surface of the insect body. What they will do is they will integrate information from their given region and then send responses back to their region immediately. So this will cut down the time or the response time needed. Imagine if you get some sort of, this insect would get some sort of bit of information to one of these ganglia, and it has to send that information all the way up to the brain. The brain has to make a decision, send everything all the way back. A lot of stuff can happen even in those few seconds that it would take to send information back and forth. So these ganglia can really react very quickly and then just sort of send the reaction up to the brain, and then the brain can then integrate all of that new information. Now, in general, each bodily segment has a ganglion that governs it. We name the ganglia based on the placement in the insect body. So starting with the brain sort of governs this entire head region. There's different lobes of the brain that are different for the different heads. Then our first ganglion is called the subesophageal ganglion. We find that here. So sub means below, esophageal refers to the esophagus. So subesophageal ganglion is just below the esophagus. All right, so that is the first ganglion. Then there are three ganglia in the thorax. Remember that the thoracic region had three major bodily segments, the prothorax, the mesothorax, and the metathorax. So each one of these segments has a thoracic ganglion. Then there are 9 to 11 segments in the abdomen, right? So each segment has its own abdominal ganglion. So each segment in the insect body has a ganglion that governs it.
The insect nervous system conveys and integrates information about the internal and external environments and determines insect behavior. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the ventral nerve cord. Here is a detailed top view of the central nervous system. The brain consists of dumbbell-shaped visual lobes with nerves that project outward to the retina of the compound eyes. The ventral nerve cord consists of a series of ganglia, usually one per segment. Ganglia are thickened regions of the nervous system that contain the cell bodies of the nerve cells. The ganglia of the ventral nerve cord are connected by paired nerves called interganglionic connectives. Finally, the brain is connected to the ventral nerve cord by a pair of nerves that pass around the esophagus and connect to the subesophageal ganglion.
All right, so that was the basics of the circulatory system and of the nervous system. Up next, we're going to be looking at the digestive and the reproductive systems. Let me know if you have any questions.